Hello and welcome to The Avatar's Voice, a show where I talk with a different person each episode about virtual worlds. On today's episode, we hear from Steve Cavers, also known online as Cubey Terra. Cubey has been in the virtual world of Second Life for more than 16 years, since September of 2003. Working as a technical writer in the physical world, in SL, Cubey is a renowned content creator famous for his vehicles, primarily aircraft and hoverpods sold under his Terra Aeronautics brand, though he's made a variety of other products as well, including virtual skydiving equipment, modular home kits, and assorted gadgets. Cubey was also a co-founder and officer of the original Abbott's Aerodrome, one of Second Life's oldest and most beloved airports. Hi Cubey, welcome to the show. So, according to one of the Second Life wikis, way back when you first joined Second Life and before you were Cubey Terra, you were Tillman Terra?
This goes back to how I ended up in Second Life in the first place. I discovered Second Life in early 2003, but I didn't have a computer that was capable of running it. So it was September when I actually ended up with a computer that could do that, sort of. And I logged in, created an account, Tillman Terra, and I spent a week in Second Life, and I realized, wow, this is going to be incredibly addictive, because I was spending hours and hours and hours just doing stuff, building stuff, playing in the sandbox. After a week, I went, nope, I can't waste this much time on Second Life. I'm going to stop. I deleted Tillman Terra. And a couple of days later, I went, I want to log in again, so I made a Cubey Terra. And Cubey, the name Cubey comes from my blog. Remember blogs? Back when blogs were popular, people called me Cubey because my blog was named Cubicle Dweller. So I just took that name in with me, and as for Terra, it was one of the many names, and it wasn't as popular as some of the others, and so I chose that one twice. Kind of earthy.
Which is kind of funny in one way that your last name is Terra, I think Latin for land or earth, considering that you're most known here for aviation and Terra Aeronautics and skydiving and all of that.
Yeah, there's a certain irony there that I ended up making planes. But, mind you, I have made ground vehicles. My first vehicles were ground vehicles. Well, they were little hovering vehicles.
It's interesting because coming in when you did actually, creating as much as you did, when it was just prims, primitive geometric shapes that is, for those listening, before Linden Lab introduced the ability to import polygon mesh made with 3D modeling programs, which I believe they did back in 2010, 2011. How do you think that shaped your experience of SL, being here and building in-world with prims long before mesh was ever an option?
I think mesh was a big mistake. I think Second Life should have just stuck with regular primitives. That things were built with primitives meant that anybody, absolutely anybody, could come into Second Life and make something that has the potential to compete with somebody else's product, or somebody else's fun toy, or whatever. But the moment they brought in mesh, they raised the skill level necessary to create content in Second Life. Suddenly, you need to know 3D modeling. And then after that, once mesh came in, we saw in the marketplace all of the prim-based things vanish one by one and get replaced by their mesh copies. I couldn't do that. I had a whole inventory full of prim vehicles that were as good as I could make them. And then when I moved over to mesh, I realized, I just don't have the 3D modeling skills that these pros have. And a lot of my competitors are just ripping 3D models out of other games and uploading it. That was just something I couldn't compete with. I don't want to compete with it. I no longer have the skills to fully compete with the high-end Second Life builders. And now everybody has to compete with professional 3D designers whose material is being ripped off and brought into Second Life. When it comes around to 2010, that's basically when I stopped making stuff in Second Life. I just don't have the time to do all that. I have a twin-engine plane that I made completely in Blender, and it's textured and scripted. It's almost done, but I just can't be asked to finish it because it's too much work. The act of creation ended up taking weeks or months of time. In the early days, you could throw together a good plane, a really good competitive plane, in a week, plus scripting time.
It's interesting to hear you describe that shift and also what it meant to you personally, because I know that, for example, Joe Yardley, I know that she's talked about how with 1920s Berlin and Time Portal, she will still build starting off with prims in Second Life, then saves it as mesh using something like Mesh Studio. She doesn't really work with a blender. I think she said that it basically melts her brain, but she can create with prims, export it as mesh, and then bring it back in. She's also talked about, and she's not the only one, of course, who's talked about how if it weren't for being able to build in a cell with primitives, many people like her might not have started to create here at all.
Primitives were the great equalizer. Anybody could come in and learn primitives because everybody approaching them was new to them. It was uniquely Second Life, and it had strict limitations, but it was building within the limitations that was the challenge. How do you take, a bunch of cubes and spheres and tubes and stuff and mash them and torture them into something that looks real? Now you just have to make it look real from scratch, and it has to be real, practically. It has to be almost photorealistic. That's not fun. If I want that, I'll just pop into, GTA.
And then with that, of course, you have a world that, depending on your system, performs a bit better than Second Life sometimes does.
In GTA, they control their assets. They don't have avatars that have, 50,000 vertices and insane textures everywhere. It's just stupid. Second Life is not optimized. It's ugly in a lot of places. It's ugly because it's limited. It will never look like GTA, but that's not the draw. The draw to Second Life isn't that it looks real. It does in places, almost, but it'll never look as good as a leading-end computer game. Again, that's not the point, and that's why I thought that primitives should have been the only thing you could do in Second Life. Because the thing about Second Life is that it's not real. It's not realistic. It's not photoreal. It's a user-built environment. I'm being a grumpy old man. It's not the way it was when I was a young'un. But I genuinely think that Linden Lab made a serious mistake. And it was an easy mistake to make, but they made a serious mistake bringing in mesh. Primitives would have kept this place attractive to novice builders. Now, if you're new, you come into Second Life and you discover the answer is no, you shouldn't try to build stuff. Because, unless you have the 3D skills, you're not going to build anything good. That's not fun. Look at that horrible hoverpod over there. I was so proud of that thing. And you know what? Most of the other vehicles looked about the same. So, that was fantastic. It sounds like I'm complaining about having competition or something. That's not it. That's not it at all. It's just the meaning of it in general was that within the limits of Second Life tools, everybody had a way to express themselves and come up with something potentially as good as anybody else could possibly build within Second Life. Then Linden Lab brought in Mesh, and that creative freedom, in a way, was taken away because it was superseded by professional quality stuff, and the average user is not professional. Now, there's just no possibility for a new user to come into Second Life and make a piece of the world that they can be proud of, because it will never look professional. And I'm really disappointed with that. I actually don't want Second Life to look like Warcraft or GTA or any of these modern games. Warcraft being around for how many decades?
Well, do you feel like, I have seen other people express this, that they wish that instead of adding mesh to Second Life, or even in addition to it, that Linden Lab had improved the prim building tools, added more features, more possibilities that would make prims a little more able to compete. Not necessarily be as realistic as mesh would, but still that you could go farther creating just with prims than you can now.
That could be nice. Maybe some simple mesh-like tools so that you could dissect a prim, remove vertices, that sort of thing. Well, yeah, something simple like that. I think the point being that the tool that Linden Lab offered was a self-contained, complete set of building tools that everybody had access to. And the moment they added mesh, most people in Second Life suddenly no longer had access to the right building tools. You can download Blender, but the majority of people can't make head or tail of it. Blender is horrible to learn. It's incredibly complicated, and even some of the ideas and the skills needed to build in Mesh are vastly greater than the Second Life built-in tools. I'm just going to say it again. I want my prims back.
I can definitely sympathize. Something else I wanted to ask you, though, this is kind of related. I know you were a Linden at one point, that you worked for Linden Lab. How do you feel that changed the way you look at Second Life, or the perspective, I guess, that you have, having been on both sides?
Well, keep in mind, this was 2005. 2006. So I was only there for a year, and everything has changed since then. But in terms of changing perspective, I did get a better understanding of how much my Second Life fellow users complain. Because the Linden Liaisons, that's where everybody went to complain. When anything's wrong, phone up a Linden and complain. But in general, besides the complaints, it was a great experience. There were a lot of people that I met that I never would have met, but as a liaison, I got to meet whole cross-section. It was great fun. Oh, the teens were so enthusiastic, too. I popped over to the teen grid occasionally, like it wasn't my main job, but on occasion I had to cover it. When I went over there, the first thing I noticed was just this explosion of creativity. Everybody was doing their own thing. And a lot of it was horribly ugly, but they were all trying to build something. And that was just great fun to talk to them and help them out.
You were talking about something earlier that made me think of another question, if I can remember what it was.
We are doing Klingon interview now. Ask your question or die.
I think I'll leave that part in the interview, actually.
Okay. You will not die, but I will frown.
You should be a voice actor. Oh, right. You were talking about how SL will never be as optimized, never be as realistic as a professionally made game like Grand Theft Auto, for example. I feel like there's a certain similarity, though, in that SL can be so many things to different people, kind of like GTA. I mean, it can serve as a flight simulator, or a driving or a sailing simulator, just to name a few of the activities that people engage in here. It doesn't do any one of them perfectly, but still manages to do them all well enough that it keeps users interested. For you, having worked so much with Second Life Aviation in particular, and dealt with SL's limitations as a flight simulator, for example, you still kept creating and flying here in spite of that.
I don't think it should be a perfect flight simulator. Again, that's not why people are coming to Second Life. People are coming to Second Life to play, be social. I think Second Life is fine being a crappy flight simulator. It's fine not looking good. It's fine having all these flaws because it's user-built, and that's our connection to it. It doesn't have to be photorealistic like a modern game, because that's not the point. The point is being social. You don't need photorealism to be social. It just needs to look cool and be fun.
That's a great point. And that's the thing. It's a shared, user-created world, as you said, and it's good enough, I guess, because of that. Or rather, it has its own special appeal because of that. Speaking of which, when you were talking earlier about building with prims, I was thinking about how that's another advantage with SL and its in-world building tools, that you could, or still can, build collaboratively in the same space with other people, even if it's just alongside some strangers in a public sandbox.
I missed those building contests. Did you ever do one of those? Get a bunch of people together in a place and say, okay, everybody, you've got 1 hour to build X, your own version of X. And when I did that sort of thing, when I ran that kind of event, it's like, here's an aircraft kit in a box. Build the best customized version of that you can. And we'd have a contest, and we'd all build together, and we'd see what we were building as we were building and talk about it. And that was, again, something completely unique and wonderful in Second Life.
I don't think I've ever been in a building contest, unfortunately. Though there is an event, I think they still do this every week at Luskwood, the old furry community where I bought my fox avatar, an event called Primtionary. Have you ever played that?
Primtionary? Oh, is that like Pictionary? You have to make a prim look like the word?
Exactly. It's a fun game. I've only played it a handful of times, but basically you go up on the stage there, the host IMs you a 1, 2, maybe 3-word thing that you have to build, and then the audience tries to guess what that thing is. Some people are absolutely amazing at it and build something that's just phenomenal in what feels like a matter of seconds. And when I've been up on stage trying to build something, it's honestly a little nerve-wracking.
Did you panic and go blank?
I mean, I think I managed it well enough that someone was eventually able to guess what my prompts were, but it was still one of those things where I thought afterward, oh god, I really need to go through the tutorials at the Ivory Tower Library of Primitives, all of the floors there, and practice. I know a few little techniques and shortcuts here and there, but still, when I compare to some of the more experienced prim builders, how quickly they're able to make something step by step from scratch right there on the stage, and even have it look pretty sophisticated for a one-off little build like that. It's just incredible to see.
Back when prims were the thing you used, people came up with some really, really fantastic sculpting technique. And there was a guy called Statoski? No, Starax Statoski. He developed a way of sculpting out of spheres so that he can make any kind of shape come out sort of organic.
There's so much creativity in a cell. I mean, so much joy in one way just from seeing what people managed to come up with. Going back to that idea of building collaboratively, though, I wanted to know what it was like here at Abbott's Aerodrome back in the day, not only building together, but creating and running that kind of major collaborative project.
Those early days in Abbott's were really quite exciting. You can open up the Aerodrome owners list, that's the group, and the people in that list are the original founders of Abbott's Aerodrome. So there's Apotheus Silverman, who I started with. It was just me and Apotheus. We had a little airstrip in Zoe, is somewhat near the governor's mansion. So we were in Zoe and we wanted more space, and suddenly all these new sims open up in the southeast of the map and they had a land rush. So we went, oh, right. Tell you what, Apotheus, we're going to go over there and we're going to buy up as many parcels as we can. And year after year, we would expand a little bit more. I'd buy more parcels and add it into the aerodrome. Apotheus had no interest really in building structures. He had his own little hangar for a while and a couple of airplanes. So he left it to me, and I recruited more people in, and we had Gillian Callahan and her helicopters, and Al Bravo. He was the one who started making parachutes popular. And so he and I built the first skydiving center in Abbott's Aerodrome. He held classes, and after the class, out to skydive, we'd all go skydiving. That kind of collaboration was just wonderful.
I love hearing about the history of it and how it all came together, because I spent a lot of time at the aerodrome myself when I first joined SL, and it really stands out as one of the iconic SL places for me, and for a lot of other people, I'm sure, too.
Now, here's a funny thing about Second Life. It's about game mechanics. The reason Abbott's became famous in the first place was because of its location. And you might look at Abbott's now and go, oh, it's in the middle of nowhere. It's hard to get to, right? How would you even find it? But at the time we founded Abbott's, Linden Lab had set up teleport hubs. And so in order to get anywhere, you had to go to the nearest teleport hub, which could be a few sims over from where you want to be, and then fly to the sim where you want to go to. Now, that was early transportation back then. And so we placed our airport between the Noyo Telehub and the sandbox, which used to be immediately to the west of Abbott's. So we were right there in a line of people flying to the sandbox, going off to build their own things, and they would fly through Abbott's and get ideas and buy stuff and play and, attend our events. And so just because of that initial traffic, we made a name for ourselves. But then the telehubs went away and we had to sort of go back to regular marketing instead of depending on walk-ins.
Yeah, I know you've said before that you're not quite as fond of the marketing side of being a creator.
Oh, I'm terrible at marketing. I hate it. That telehub supplied basically most of our visitors.
I forget when exactly they removed them. I know we still had to travel via telehub when I joined Second Life in early 2005, but I think it wasn't too long after that, maybe later that year even, that they made it possible to start teleporting directly to whatever coordinates you wanted, and then the telehubs sort of became obsolete.
I still like the concept of having to be in transit so that you can't just teleport poof somewhere immediately. But, Second Life works well enough with instant teleportation everywhere, I guess. I just liked those telehubs because you could meet people there.
Yeah, to meet people, and it was kind of an interesting experience to travel through them in a way, to arrive at a telehub and then see that big red beam of light somewhere in the world in front of you, marking your destination, and think, okay, that's where I have to go.
And you fly to the beam. You fly towards the beam with a little number of meters away, counting down slowly.
That's one of the things, though, with a virtual world like Second Life or with these newer social VR platforms, that you have to decide, or the developers have to decide, what the limitations are going to be, to try to imagine how those limitations might affect the way that people interact with one another and with the world itself. With telehubs, of course, Linden Lab ultimately made the decision that that wasn't something they thought the world really needed or benefited from. But like you said, in other areas, like with prims, user creativity has often helped or even guided somehow by having certain limitations on what people can do or how they create.
That's art, isn't it? Art is creating something in spite of limitations. If you could make anything just with a snap of your fingers, if anybody could do that, it wouldn't be art anymore. Art is making something in spite of something keeping you from doing it.
That's an excellent point, yeah, that human creativity is inspired by and arises because of limitations. Someone else, by the way, whose name comes to mind for me when I think of you and Abbott's Aerodrome and everything that you all made there is Retsuki Kojima, who I know you partnered with on various primarily steampunk-style airships. Retsuki doing the prim sculpting for those, if I remember correctly, and you handling the scripting side. How did that collaboration come about?
Ray is a talented sculptor, and he was around basically from the beginning. I don't know. I remember he showed up during one of the contests and just never left. It was great to have him around, and some of his designs were so intriguing that we teamed up.
With all that you've done, actually, for how long you've been in Second Life, almost since the very beginning, and everything you've created here, your importance to the aviation community in particular, you are something of a legendary figure, I hope you realize. How does it feel to be famous?
Well, SL famous. This is even worse than internet famous. But it was odd having people say, "Oh, Cubey," and it's like, I have no idea who they are. It's just odd. And the only reason it's like that is because I was just one of the first people to do that sort of thing that I was doing, making vehicles. I wasn't the first, wasn't the best, but I just did it a lot. I think also I gave away a lot of scripts and helped other people start up. You know, if that's why people remember my name, I hope that's why, and not because, "Oh, Cubey, you're the idiot who did X, Y, and Z."
As we're talking, by the way, I should mention that through the window of the pub here at Abbott's, I've seen I don't know how many people come parachuting down onto the runway.
I see people coming down on the Terra E-chute. Man, that thing's old. I made that in 2004 as sort of a freebie to add on to the planes in case people wanted to jump out for some reason. And that kicked off a whole skydiving thing. At one point, I had this really weird-looking spaceship kind of thing with 2 pods, one on either side, and each pod held 3 skydivers, and it would go up to altitude. You can have a pilot if you like, or it could be autopiloted. And it would take you up to altitude to the right place and drop you, and then return to the ground on its own.
I don't know if I ever actually saw that. I would use your skydiving pods, the circular 6-seater ones, I think, at Abbott's all the time back in the day, but I don't think I ever used the dropship. Did you have it at your store?
Oh, it was too ugly to sell. It was functional, it was just too ugly.
Switching gears a little, you and I were together on a panel that Draxter organized for an episode of his podcast a few years ago, back in early 2017, and the topic of the discussion was Sansar, Linden Lab's other newer virtual world platform, for those who don't know. This was before Sansar had actually released, of course, and there was a lot of uncertainty and fear even on the part of Second Life residents about what Sansar would mean for us. Hence the episode's title, obviously, Sansar Anxiety Getting Stronger. Looking at things now, 3 years later, what are your thoughts on that?
I think a lot of the Sansar panic has died now. That Sansar would take over from Second Life or make Second Life fade away. I don't think that ever materialized because Sansar just hasn't taken off. There are too many other more approachable social VR environments, like, what is that, AltSpace VR? VR Chat is another one. From what I can see, a lot of people in Second Life have relaxed a bit about Sansar now that they know it's not taking off. Which is, you know, I really wanted Sansar to really take off so Linden Lab could spare the money to keep Second Life around. But it seems like it's the other way around. Second Life is still the moneymaker, and Sansar is still struggling to get attention.
Yeah, exactly. I doubt that Linden Lab in particular expected those roles to still be reversed, as you said, to this extent, this far into Sansar's development. And I mean, with Second Life as well, though its population remains steady and it is still quite successful in many ways, it has struggled over the years in terms of mainstream user adoption. Even the social VR platforms that you mentioned and social VR in general isn't quite at the level that I know a lot of people would want to see it at, as far as reaching critical mass and appealing to a broader audience.
It's a funny thing. Virtual reality, this kind of virtual reality, this virtual world that we share here, the most fundamental bits of human existence are still absent. You can't feel pain, you can't feel anything, you can't feel good as far as physical sensations. You can't eat with someone. That's very fundamental to human communication. Just the physical act of putting something in your mouth at the same time as somebody else, it's very, very instinctual, right down at a primitive level. And smelling. You can't smell anything. I wonder if there's any way to bring that level of reality into VR, because those are essential to the human condition, or any animal's condition, to experience something.
The interesting thing about that, though, at least for me, is that a world like Second Life still manages to be so engaging to so many of us, and encourages a surprisingly strong suspension of disbelief, you might say, in spite of all the things that, like you said, are still missing. That actually leads pretty well into another thing I wanted to bring up. I don't know if you saw, but Ryan Schultz wrote a post on his blog a few weeks ago about how to prepare for Second Life shutting down, which it's not, as far as I know, at least not anytime soon. As Ryan said, SL will probably still be around for years, but his point was that it can be good to start thinking now about what we'll all do when it does disappear, how to prepare for that loss. I know I and many others are extremely attached to this world and all the places and the people in it, and I have to admit, though I definitely understand and appreciate where he was coming from with that post, it's odd to think about the world just not being there.
It's worrisome, but, maybe because I have a theater background.
Way back in the 90s, back when I was a young man. Back when I was a young man and I trod the boards.
I had trouble with the idea that we put weeks and weeks of work, long hours every day to put together a show, building sets, rehearsing, tweaking, just sweat and blood and everything. Tears. Lots of tears. But at the end of the run, poof, it's gone. There's no record of it at all. The experience is gone. All it was a couple of weeks of evenings where 100 or 200 people could come and have a common experience. And then it's gone. The show's gone. So I have these memories of all these shows that I helped build and put together, and they were amazingly creative experiences and massive work and massive creative output. And at the end of that, it's just gone. There's a poster. That's it.
So Second Life as theater set in some ways.
Yeah, Second Life. Well, when they shut it down, all of us have this common memory of having built this ourselves. And that's fantastic. So Second Life, and I've said this since I started, Second Life is not about the technology, it's about the people. And the environments that the people want to create to share with the people they want to be with. What you're doing in Second Life is you're creating an experience that you shared. It's the shared experience that pulls people together. So is Second Life temporary? Well, okay, yeah. Yeah, but right now, what we're doing in this very second is an experience. The conversation too ends, and it will just be a memory. So when Second Life closes down, we can keep on going by just picking up on a different platform, or, some people can go off and form a commune somewhere and build their own little town with beanstalks and skydiving. I don't know.
Hey, I would live there. I know we're almost out of time, by the way. I have one last question for you.
This is the final question.
You really need to do voice acting. In world, if nothing else. The question is, if Second Life were to shut down, whenever it eventually does, if you were to move to another virtual world platform, what parts of Second Life, just conceptually even, would you want to have there?
If I had to leave Second Life, and I wanted to be in a new world, and I had Second Life-ish things to put in it, what aspects of Second Life would I want?
Exactly. Like what, for you personally, are the best parts of SL that you'd want to bring with you?
The best parts of Second Life that I want to bring into another virtual world, I would say, 1, building tools, 2, all of my friends and acquaintances, and 3, this actually makes me want to make changes to Second Life. And I would say I would want to bring all of Second Life with me, except that there's no such thing as an island. All of it is contiguous. All of it. Like the real world. That's what I want. So I would take Second Life in a new virtual world, make it into an actual planet that you can travel around. And that's virtual reality.
That would be amazing. Cubey, it's been absolutely wonderful to have you on the show. Thank you so much for being here. And thank you to all of you listening out there, whenever and wherever you're listening from. If you want to learn more about Cubey and his work, including a beautifully written Second Life-related short story of his that I highly recommend reading, just follow the links down below. Until next time, this was the Avatar's Voice, and this is Eric Mondrian logging out.